Testing, testing. That, but we'll chat just a little bit. Let me just
Okay.
fix something right here. Let me make sure I'm recording it. Okay. All right. Um,
Turn away from that.
so yeah, so my hope is that uh the listeners to the podcast will be inspired by your story and have a good take home lesson as far as what to do, what not to do when they're faced with challenges, and just some good actionable advice, and also just learning about who you are and what brought you here and kind of what keeps you going. Um, I'll what I'll do is I'll record separately an intro based on the bio that you had sent me before we start the interview. And so then we'll just jump right in and I'll ask you about what your childhood was like and your influences and everything.
Okay.
Are you in New York right now, or are you outside of New York?
No, so I came down to Florida January 1st to work preparing guys for NFL Combine.
Ah,
And
gotcha.
normally I
Okay.
would have gone back after off season ended, like April 1st, but staying down here. I mean, I do
Yeah.
have an apartment in New York City, and all of my friends are like, do not come back. Just don't. And I'm not, so I'm kind of
Yeah.
like
So you're there.
displaced
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. I
So,
hear you. Okay. Um, and then, I'll just ask about different challenges that you had going into your field. And um, let's see, I made a couple of notes. I liked it. I always have a couple of questions that I think about, and plan to use, but I would like for it to be conversational, and we may go off on a
okay.
tangent, and that's okay. And then at the end, I'll ask for, as we wrap up, I'll ask for one major piece of advice that you would have for women that either want to go into your field or just in going into a male dominated field in general. And then I'll finish up with making sure that everyone knows how to find you online.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. All right. And then if you want to reword anything and restart, we can do that because they'll be editing.
Okay, great.
All right. Okay. So I'll pause for a second. And you like to go by Jackie or Jaclyn?
I guess Jaclyn Sklaver.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, Jaclyn. Thank you so much for being on the 6% with me today.
Thanks for having me on.
I'm really excited to talk to you today because you have had an interesting path in your career. You do some really cool stuff, and I would love to have our listeners learn a little bit more about your background and kind of how this all started, what your childhood and your upbringing was like to get you to where you are now.
Sure. So I knew that I was interested in nutrition from a very young age, grade school. I didn't want to eat the food in the cafeteria. Didn't know why, but I knew I didn't want to eat that food. And then it even carried over like into Girl Scout camp, and they would call
Mhm.
my mom and be like, your daughter won't eat this food. And my mom's like, no, my daughter's not going to eat spam. Like, she's very particular about what she eats. And so I just was, I didn't know why, but I knew that like food interests me, and that there was something wrong with eating these processed hot dogs and eating chips and all that. And I was always really active. So I played sports from as young as I can remember. And whether it was like on the rec council, and then I started playing on a team in middle school and high school. So that synergy was there where I was like, okay, now I sort of understand what's going into my body is going to affect, my sports and things like that. So I think that kind of carried over. And when I was about 15 years old, I decided to start lifting weights on my own. And where I grew up, we didn't have like weight rooms for women. I know down south, a lot of the high schools have these very intensive programs where the women are lifting weights, and in the Northeast, it just wasn't a thing. So my father would drive me to the gym after I finished like basketball or track, and I would work out every day. Like every day I fell in love with the weight room. I was the only female. I didn't really think about it. I just watched what the guys did and wrote my programs myself, and that just carried on. I mean, throughout college, and now I'm 41 years old, and I'm still sometimes the only female in the weight room. Um, but I didn't. I tried to go to college for exercise science, and I was really intimidated by the sciences. And I was in one of those huge schools with how many 500 people in a room. and I just wasn't ready for it. So my undergrad was in public relations and poli-sci. And then I just continued on my own path of helping people, like learning about nutrition on my own, learning about exercise science, always being in the gym. In college, I would teach spin. Spin just came out. So to make some extra money, I would teach spin at the college gym. And so it was just kind of naturally there. And then I would say in my mid 30s, I started working for a startup that was in like the sports field or fitness industry. I partnered with fitness facilities. And then I realized like, no, this is my passion. This is what I want to do. I want to really get into this more. And I went back to school to get my master's degree in nutrition.
Awesome.
Left kind of that like cushy corporate job in New York City. Well, this was a startup, but I had a nice salary, put it that way.
Yeah.
And I just was like, I went and got a personal training license, and I decided to start grad school. And that was about, I feel like a six or 7 year adventure of struggling as a college student in my late 30s in New York City, but
Mhm.
doing what I love. I mean, really, really loved it. And it wasn't easy. I had to get a tutor. Listen, science didn't get any easier in my late 30s, I'll tell you that much. But I knew how to handle it better, I guess,
Yeah.
as somebody who's gone through things. So I was teaching yoga at the Ronald McDonald House at 5 and 6 a.m. before, and then I would have a tutor for 2 hours, 3 days a week to help
Wow.
me. Because I didn't have the sciences, I had intensive prerequisites of biochem and A&P. So I just did what I had to do to get through it, And then, as you know,
Yeah.
once you're into that more, once you're into nutritional sciences more, then it starts to become applying theory, right? Applying your
Right.
practice, and it's much more interesting. Still difficult, but much more interesting than organic chemistry. Um,
Yep.
so,
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
was a struggling college student for the past few years of my life. um,
Mhm.
and then along the way, I always educated myself. So I was really involved in like the International Society of Sports Nutrition, the Academy of like with the NSCA and ASCM and all of them. And so I would go to these conferences and like I would put them on my credit card because I couldn't even afford it, like the flights and everything. And it was really about networking and learning more. Um,
Right.
and so I think that I started my own practice. So I started my own practice before I had my degree because I already had kind of the knowledge, and I had people who wanted to know from me. They wanted me to help them. So I think that when I finished school, I was a little bit ahead of most people,
Mhm.
and I still am. And so with that being said, my second year of graduate school, I picked up an internship down in Atlanta. And the ad said, or it wasn't an ad, it was on a forum, and it said, we're looking for somebody to work with NFL players, preparing them for the NFL, but it's in Atlanta. And that was like the stipulation. When I called, they're like, sure, come on down here, but we're not paying for anything. We'll give you a small stipend to cover being here, but you're not getting like housing or room and board or anything.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I flew down there and I just fell in love. Like I knew I wanted to be there. The place I was working at treated me like family. I just felt so at home. And I got an Airbnb for 2 months and stayed down in Atlanta. And that was like my first year working with the NFL players. Um, and then I decided I wanted to move down there after that. And I literally was down there January, February. And then by September 1st of that year, I moved from New York City down to Atlanta.
Awesome.
And that's kind of how things went. So,
Yeah, I want to go back to your experience as a non-traditional student. I was kind of grinning as you were telling me the story because I had a really similar experience myself. Walked into like pre-med class as a freshman with 600 people and effectively got weeded out very quickly. And similarly went back to school, and I didn't start med school until I was almost 30. But I feel like when you go out and you have a career and then you decide to go back to school, you have to be scrappy. And I think you were scrappy, in having a tutor and working and going through school as an older, an older adult compared to going straight through as an undergrad, don't you think?
absolutely. And it still carries over now. I mean, I'm still in my
Yeah.
industry where, like, I'm around a lot of most RDs and most
Hmm.
sports, most nutritionists are just straight out of school. Now, I think it works to my advantage a little bit because I am more mature and I am more experienced, and I understand how to work with people and human nature
Hmm.
so much better. And although I'm not a mom, I kind of play that nurturing role with a lot of people. So I think it does work to my advantage, but it's interesting. It's weird. Sometimes it hits me like, you're the oldest person here. You know, even when I'm with the owners of the facilities I work at, I'm the oldest person in there, you know.
Yeah.
But no, absolutely. And it's humbling. It's really humbling to go back to
Mhm.
school older, especially in New York City, because my rent didn't change. My lifestyle had to change. You know,
Yeah.
everything I did every day, the things I bought, the things I did, taking vacation, whatever, I had to change that as a 30-some-year-old woman, you know. So
Yeah.
it's different when you're in college eating ramen noodles than when you're like telling your friends, yeah, I can't go out tonight. I don't have the money, you know.
Yeah, I
So
think there's a lot of sacrifice that has to be made, and then simultaneously you have to keep your eye on the prize, right? Because it's easy to sort of slip back into say, gosh, I really miss, whatever those extra things are. And you realize that, you have to really make that want versus need list,
yeah.
right? As you're going through something like that. So, who are your role models when you were growing up?
It's interesting. I always feel like, well, younger, I used to I don't know if you like ever watch like the ESPN workout video, you know, like they used to have the workouts. I used to love like Corey Everson and stuff like that. I
Uh-huh.
always looked up to these
Yeah.
women that were on TV working out. I was like, I want to be like them, you know? Um, so that, and I'm not even kidding. Like I would be in my bedroom and I'd watch them in the mornings and all the muscle and fitness magazines. And I used to read
Mhm.
through them and like, I want to be these people. And so that was kind of like who I looked up to as a kid. And then of course athletes, you know, I was always into like, you know, loved athletes. So, but as I got older, and this is something I always say, and even still now, like I never really had a mentor or a role model or somebody that I could go to and say like, hey, you did this. Can you help me? Can you guide me? Can you? And I'm experiencing it right now, even trying to hire contracted staff. Like I don't have anyone to go to ask like, how did you do this? Um, so it's really hard. I didn't have a lot of mentors at all. I look to people that are established business, like I'm friends with a lot of sports agents, and that's kind of independent business owner, some female athletes or female coaches that have done really well, but there's not that many people out there to have as a mentor, you know, and that's why I hope that one day I can offer that to somebody. So,
That's amazing. I think it's much needed, and throughout in my own experience, there have fortunately been a lot of male role models that have been very supportive and influential. But I think it's important for women to see others that just look like them, and whether it's to see other women who are doing what they want to do someday, or even, like for you and I both, seeing somebody who's not the traditional go straight through school and jump right into the nutrition and strength and conditioning space, and just people who have made a career pivot after a couple years out of being out of college. I think even just having that is important, and letting people know that you don't have to know what you want to do at age 19, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, or you knew what you wanted to do, and like us, you kind of didn't trust yourselves, and then went back to it because ultimately your heart's
Yeah.
going to go where it wants to go, right? That's what's going
Yeah.
to make you happy. And I see a lot of people that work, you know, corporate jobs, and they have a paycheck every week, but they're not happy. They don't love what they do, but they don't want to be uncomfortable. And you have
Yeah.
to be uncomfortable very often, you know. So, and it's interesting in my field, it's very competitive, I guess, and so to
Mhm.
have men mentors that are doing the same thing as me, like, and I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I haven't really met anybody because they're very they look at me as competition rather than like wanting to
Mm,
help and teach me. And I think it has a lot to do
yeah.
with ego, unfortunately. But that's one of the hardships of being in this professional sports or strength and conditioning, you know, and that sports nutrition industry is, unfortunately, there's egos, you know,
Right.
and I have to deal with that. So this is what it is, you know.
Yeah.
Like I know what I signed up for.
And what other challenges did you have going into your field as a woman?
I would say that that's probably the biggest thing is just
Mhm.
keep men having this barrier of, well, okay, there's a couple. So there's the barrier of, I've had pushback from some men, that
Mhm.
especially younger ones, and that's why I love working at performance facilities owned by established people that, you know, they're a little bit older, they have an established business, they've been at it for 20 years, they know I bring value, they don't look at me as competition. Um, and then I would say the other pushback is, and I've talked about this before, my male counterparts who are like private coaches within the NFL, they're a lot further than me because their athletes take them on as their own and help and promote them. And so, for instance, one of my friends is a coach, and like the athletes he works with, he even travels with them sometimes. Like they'll go out together, they'll go to dinner together. They're posting him on their Instagram, and that gives so much. If you say like, "Hey, my boy's the best at this," or if these guys were like, "Jackie's the best at nutrition," like you need to work with her, and they started posting me, I would get a lot more business. Unfortunately, there's a stigma behind it. They're just not going to post a woman on their Instagram like that. They're not going to pal up with me. They're not going to consider me part of their crew, and they're not going to promote me because of that fact that it's the way it looks, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And I can't
The
change that. Like I
optics.
can't change that I'm a
Yeah.
female. I can't take that. Oh, and I mean, I want to say I get it. I get it. Like I understand that psychology where they're coming from, but it's a huge disadvantage, and I can't change the fact that I'm a female. It is what it is. And I know that I would definitely be further and have more business, uh, and be a more household name. I guess, if my athletes were to promote me like they do the guys that I know, and that's a
Mhm.
huge thing. So, um, other than that, there's some people in the sports, some people that are professionals in sports nutrition and strength and conditioning that are sexist. There's no doubt about that, and I've seen it with other women that I know too. Um, but I don't really look at that as a huge hurdle because that's just, unfortunately, as a female, that's just part of what we have to deal with, right? So to me, I just blow that off. That's the least of my problems. But I would say those are like some of the bigger issues. And then, of course, to be honest, you get hit on by men, and
Mhm.
it's uncomfortable. It's something that you have to expect and deal with, and know how to handle. It's like there's no guideline. We're not taught how to deal with that in a professional way, and to not offend. And unfortunately, I have to look at it as like, okay, now I have to handle this, not offend the person who is offending me, right? And not make it a big deal, but stand my ground.
Right.
Where's the guidelines? Where's the handbook for that? Where's the
Yeah.
college
They
course
don't
on that?
teach you that in school. That's
Yeah.
there's definitely no
So
textbook for that. And it's about a little bit about kind of picking your battles or picking kind of how hard you're going to fight back in a battle, right?
yeah, it's like I just want to stand my ground and let somebody know that's not gonna, like, this isn't gonna fly. But it happens, and it happens often. Not all the time, but I'm just not surprised by it anymore. When
Right.
I'm in a room and it's me and 100 guys, almost every day that's the ratio. Let's just say, or me and 20 guys, or there's very rarely other women around. I mean, it's just unfortunately part of what comes with it.
It
So
would be I think we're still a ways away, and I think it'll be a pretty massive culture change and a culture shift for that not to happen. We're seeing like little inklings of that in various industries where there's a little bit more awareness, but I think in professional sports, it is so male dominated that I think it's going to be a while. It's going to take
yeah,
a lot of work.
and also, just like this whole Me Too thing has helped a lot because a lot of men now are aware that we need that support. The men that are on our sides, and they will stand their ground. So I've had athletes hear other guys say something to me in a weight room, and they take my ground. So when I'm in an environment where I'm working with guys that have known me for a while, they almost like big brother up, and
Mhm.
they cut it out right away. And that way, and I never have to deal with it again in that environment, wherever that may be, because they will
Right.
stop it right where it starts. So that's, once again, if the athletes are behind me, it's so much more. It's like they're like it's so much more strength than me standing up for myself. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, because I think if the men are willing to stand up and say, "Hey, this is not okay. You treat her as a colleague, that you treat her as a professional," then that helps. That carries a lot of weight.
mhm.
So in the NFL space, obviously, how it's very male dominated. It's there's a lot of maleness there, right, that you're dealing with. And how do you gain respect as a female and a professional in that space?
For me, the easiest part of it is once I train with them, and it depends
Yeah.
on the place I'm at. Like some places allow me to be a little more interactive, but like I train competitively as a master's level weightlifter. So I'm training 5 days a week myself, and I do conditioning
Mhm.
work. So some of the facilities have the ability. I have my own barbell. I can go in and I will lift when they're lifting, or I will do some conditioning work. Obviously, when they're there training and it's like their focused time, I let them do their thing. But afterwards, or I'll come in on weekends. Or that is the best way for them to realize, oh, she's just not some woman telling us what to do. She's one of us. She's a peer. She lives this life. And it gets me more respect and understanding than anything else I could possibly do. This year, I had a bad ankle injury and I was in a boot for my first month with my college guys. And it was different.
Yeah.
I didn't get that. that acceptance, I didn't get that bonding time right away. So I think that them seeing and then working out with me and realizing like, oh, she's one of us, that helps so much because I'm not just telling them what to do, but I get it. I really understand what they're going through. So that's my number one way is really just working out with them.
Did you ever have a point through your career where you thought, "Oh my gosh, who am I to be doing this? And, I don't belong here." And were there moments of doubt that made you wanna say, "Oh my gosh, I need to quit. I wanna turn around and run away."
Yeah, I'm going through that still right now. I mean, so this year I came down to Florida where I was in Atlanta for 3 years prior, and I was felt
Yeah.
very at home and very family, and like then I came down to Florida to a new place. And this season it was different. It was definitely different. Like I walked in the doors of this place and everything was completely different, and I'm like, okay, so now what? And so I'm going through it now, and I'm also knock wood trying to break into the NBA arena as well. And
Mhm.
so, not that I know that I know I'm confident in my knowledge. I'm confident in my skills. I'm confident in all that, but I'm not always confident that they want me there, if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
do these people want me in the room? And that's where it gets weird because it's like, okay, what am I doing here?
Mhm.
Should I go back tomorrow? Do I want to ask them if they want me back next year? Am I going to be okay? And these are things that go through my head, and they've been going through my head recently because we're starting to plan out next year. Now, last
Mhm.
year I had this confidence where like I just came down to Florida, went into the facility I wanted to work in, and was like, well, I emailed them first, and I was like, hey, this is what I do. I want to do this with you guys. So it's kind of like that meme that you see on Instagram where like the life of an entrepreneur is like, hey, I'm doing great. Oh no, this is horrible. Like that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
some days I feel like on top of the world, and the other days I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing?
What do
So I
you
think that
say to
I'm still there.
yourself to cope with that and to talk yourself out of that doubt?
It's really just I have to. I always say I love being uncomfortable is where I strive. So, yeah, I have to give it a shot. Like, what am I gonna do? Not give it a shot at least? What's the worst thing that can happen? I've kind of learned to start asking for things or putting myself in situations where at least people can say no. Um, and I've heard it a lot. So I think it's just, I got to do it. I've come this far. I've worked this hard. I've put so much into it that even if I'm not wanted in a room, I just have to show up and I have to do what I can do and like do my best at doing me. If it's me sitting in a corner by myself and just doing my work or whatever, I just have to get past it. I've been in a lot of uncomfortable situations, so I just keep going.
And you make a good point. I think if you're not hearing no, then it means you're probably not pushing yourself to that point of discomfort, right? You should be hearing a no because even though, it's like the worst thing that could happen, they tell you no, but at least you know that you've put yourself out there and maybe made yourself a little bit vulnerable by doing so.
And it still hurts sometimes too, right? Like you hear
For
no and you're
sure.
like, that kind of
Yeah.
sucks. I'd rather actually hear no than be ignored. I hate when
Oh,
like I get
yeah.
completely ignored. Like I emailed you, somebody else. I usually get an introduction from somebody and that helps.
Hmm.
But at least say, hey, we're not interested, or maybe next year, like just something. Don't just ignore my
It's
request or
it's
my
like
question.
professional ghosting. It's
Yeah, it happens a lot. But
yeah,
um,
yeah, unfortunately. So
so
we hear a lot about pay gap in the corporate world, for example. Tell me a little bit about that and how it plays out in your world.
So because I don't work for a team or anything, and
Mhm.
I'm kind of new, like I'm innovating this pathway. I don't even know what other people charge like, to do what I do. There's not that many people, but I do know from a nutritionist standpoint, RDs and things like that, they compared to strength and conditioning coaches, they're getting paid so much less. And if you think about it, a sports nutritionist, it has just as much influence over the athlete really as the person in the weight room. I mean, I'm sorry, but they
Mhm.
work hand in hand. And I know that it's a new thing, but if you really think about it, if you don't eat correctly, you're not recovering correctly. It's just such a big part. It's such a big part of it. But the strength and conditioning coaches are getting up millions, some places, at least six figures. In most places,
Wow.
colleges and pro level. There's not one RD. I mean, maybe if you've been with a team, you're full time, but mostly you're looking at 60, 70,000 full time. And it's like, wait a minute. I went to school. I'm licensed. I'm a licensed healthcare professional. Why am
Mhm.
I not making the same thing as this guy in the weight room?
Yeah.
And there's a big difference there, without a doubt. So I see that. Um, but I can't compare myself to somebody else exactly in my position because I don't know anyone else and what they'd be charging. But I would, if I had a bet on it, I'd say if I offered out a number and a man offered out the number, the man would get it before me. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Tell me how you marry I mean, it makes perfect sense to bring the strength and conditioning and the nutrition together, but tell me how you marry that in your day-to-day practice in working with your clients.
sure. So I'm also a strength and conditioning coach and a weightlifting coach. So for my general population, I actually write workouts a lot. And that's a big
Uh-huh.
part of the science for me too. I'm just a science geek. So like I studied the principles of exercise science and programming. I'm really into programming and I understand the body. And I try, that's like almost a hobby of mine. So I really understand what's going on from that perspective, depending on where they're at. So if they're in off season, or if they're in season, are they in hypertrophy? Are they in overload? Like where are we? And I periodize their nutrition with what's going on in their strength and conditioning, and of course, what's going on if they're in season. So I think it's really important that you have to have a really good understanding as a
Mhm.
sports nutritionist of what's going on in the weight room, what's going on from a scientific perspective of the way they're periodizing their training, and then also understanding, of course, the sport. So it depends. Like if I'm getting more into NBA, I understand it a little bit, but I need to understand it more. I know so much about football and each position and what's called upon for them and different times of the year and how their body changes and how their hormones change. Like I read all the research on it because what I'm doing is trying to help prevent those hormonal changes and trying to help prevent them from being, worn out too soon. And I work
Mhm.
on everything. I mean, not just from like carbohydrates, but I work with nootropics. So, things cognitive function and
Mhm.
reaction time, um, and recovery. And, so there's so much more to know, I guess, than just what people need to eat, but understanding what's going on from the strength and conditioning side of it and what's going on from their position side and the season and the whole sport in general.
Right. So, what would be your number one piece of advice for women who want to go into a field like yours or a male-dominated field?
I think that you should definitely continue to do it. Try to find a mentor. There are more women out there doing it now than definitely when I was younger. Don't be discouraged at all by the fact that there's not many other women in there. Um, and I think that my biggest advice would be to try to find another woman that's in it, and join organizations like I said, International Society of
Mhm.
Sports Nutrition, Academy of Sports Medicine. Um, Attend those conferences and network, and that's really where you're going to meet people. Because like I attend them, and one of the women that works with me attends them. She's also a sports nutritionist. And if you see two women sitting there, like go up to them and talk to them, and introduce yourself, and say, hey, I'm a student of blah blah blah. You know, I would love to keep in touch with you. Um, and just do that. That's probably one of the best things that you could possibly do because you never know where that's going to take you. And you never know what you might have a question with a client later, or you may see a job opening or
Mhm.
want to work somewhere down the road. So I think that's really important. But also you need that, you might go through a situation where you need to ask somebody. There's one sports nutritionist who's a female who I told her what I was going through with something, and she said, "Oh, I went through that too." And that was a changer for me because I was still an intern then, and I was really feeling discouraged by this like boys club. And she said, "I went through that, and they tried to take an award away from me." She's like, "You have
Oh,
no idea
wow.
what these guys did to me." And when she told me that, I was like, okay, I need to stick with this. Like, I'm not alone. You're not alone. Ladies, you're
Right.
not alone. I am telling you, you're not alone. So I think it's like stay strong and just talk to other women and just sort of ask, talk, network, things like that.
Absolutely. Having that community is so important for us. So
Hmm.
I would love for our listeners to be able to find you online and keep up with what you're up to. So can you tell us where your online home is as far as your website or where to find you on social media?
Sure. My website is Athletes Nutrition, and I spell that ATHLEATS, like athlete, eating food.
Mhm.
And then, so my Instagram is the same thing. It's Athletes Nutrition, and that's where I post a lot of stuff. I try to do some informative posts, at least once a week. I'm doing educational posts. I do lots of like stories, and then my Twitter is athletes underscore ATHLEATS underscore. But I'd say that my Instagram is definitely where you're going to get the most information, and then my website if you want to find out about my services.
Awesome. Thank you, Jaclyn, for being on with me today. I loved learning about what you do. It was great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on.
Yay. Thank you.
You're
That was really
welcome.
cool.
I feel good. I don't
So
know if I went on a tangent or if you want to cut everything
no,
out.
that's okay. We're all about tangents here. I
Okay.
go off on tangents too. So, and and it's like I said, I like to have it feel as conversational as possible, and so
Mhm.
I just let it flow a little bit. How did you so Mook like has sent me so many interesting women to talk to. It's almost I got connected with him through Chithra Durgam, who's a dentist, and I only know her like virtually online through Twitter. And she said, "Hey, you should talk to Mook." And then he was like, "I have like 5 million amazing women that you can talk to," and so like the floodgates opened, and it was really cool. How did you get connected with him?
So Mook was with Vayner Sports, and Vayner
Uh
Sport,
huh.
knows Gary Vee, and like
Uh huh.
so. I think I first met Mook uh, through, I met him at Super Bowl last year in Atlanta. Vayner Sports was having a huge party, and I was there, and Mariana, who was a woman in Atlanta, had introduced me in because she does some like psychological coaching for Vayner Sports athletes, and
Oh,
that's when I
cool.
first met him, and we kept in touch. And like I'm friends with a couple of Vayner Sports athletes. I've worked with some, and like the first
Mm-hmm.
Vayner Sports athlete is one of my good friends. He's a retired athlete, so it's a very close kind of community. And as
Yeah.
I've grown, like I have I'm close with a lot of sports agents. They're the ones with the athletes. So we kind of kept in touch. And whenever he was in New York doing networking events, we would meet up at the
Mm-hmm.
networking events and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
initially, I had met him at a Super Bowl party in Atlanta 2 years ago.
Oh,
Kept in
cool. That's
contact with him.
awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you do public speaking as well?
I would like to get into that more. I mean, now with everything that I'd have to do Zoom speaking, right? But I
Yeah,
do want to
yeah.
educate more, and so that's something I'm trying to get into. I'm putting together a proposal for the NFLPA right now, which is the NFL Players Association.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, how can my company bridge the gap between what they're offering at the team and outside of there? So I think public speaking could be in that. I have a lot of knowledge in nutrition, and I feel like it could be shared on a larger level, like with more people than if just one on one. So there's that part of it. And then, of course, talking about being a woman in sports and things like
Yeah.
that. So there's
Yeah.
definitely different angles to take for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That was the reason why I started to do a little bit of speaking. I'm trying to do more, but hey, similar to you, I feel like we have a lot of parallels. It's like you have all this knowledge, and when I work with a patient, it's one on one, right? I'm doing surgery for somebody, but it's there's so much knowledge that could be shared on a much broader platform, and that's part of why I got myself on social media, and it's just it's kind of an interesting place. I've learned a lot over the last 2 years or so that I've been on there, and it's you can definitely reach a lot more people, and kind of I've gone through the evolution of figuring out which platform seems to work best. On
Yeah.
Twitter, it seems like it's a lot more professionals connecting with professionals, whereas on Instagram, it's more, for me at least, it seems to be more women who want to go into medicine or go into a surgical field where there aren't a lot of women. So more the mentoring piece for me on Instagram. But yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting for me. Like I just had to do like I had to do photo shoots for instance, because it's like it's not just about your knowledge, but now it's about your content, and it's like
yeah,
it's such so like I could just put something out, but it has to look pretty and it has to catch people's attention, and people want to see you in the photo, and it's like, geez, I do my hair once a week now, like
I know.
I don't want to be in the photo, and but it matters. It matters. Like I
Yeah,
could put out amazing content with a stupid photo, and it won't get spread around. But if I could, it's just I just have to put so much work into it, and people will follow you because you're putting out good information. You can't just put nonsense out there.
right.
It's like another job. And when you're
It's
like
hard work.
educating people, it is. I can't just like somebody's like, well, we'll just hire someone to do your Instagram, and I'm like, they don't have my knowledge. How are they going to just do
Yeah,
my Instagram? So
yeah.
it's a whole nother job.
It is. It
Yeah.
is for sure. Well, I thank you again. And what I'll do is I'll let you know as the episode gets edited and when the release date is. The podcast itself has not yet been released, but we may be cutting it close for trying to release at the end of May. So I'm thinking probably early June is when launch
Okay.
date is going to be. And so I'll let you know both about that and about your episode. Your episode may be a few months, hopefully not too many months down the line as we get it edited and everything. But I'll let you know about launch, and if you're willing to share, I would love it. I'm
Sure.
just trying to get it up and off the ground, and also if you can think of anybody who would be a good fit for being on the show, always happy to take recommendations and introductions as well.
Okay, great. Definitely. Did
Yeah.
I'm sure he told you about Brittany Gilman. She did my PR for a little bit. Did he tell you about Britt?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, because I think she's also a sports agent, but she's like now just doing PR marketing for sports.
Oh, cool.
So,
Uh-huh.
but she kind of understands the struggle too.
Yeah. Oh,
So
I
I
would
can
I
introduce you
would
guys.
love yeah, if you don't mind sending an email on, I would love to connect with her
Okay,
also.
definitely.
Yeah. Well,
All right.
stay safe, and
Thank
I
you.
hope that, that you do well and that you pivot during this time to kind of make it through. It's really hard. It's hard for all of us.
Yeah, I'll figure it out. I
Yeah.
just need to know. I need sports to figure out what they're doing. That will help too. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All
Thanks for
right.
having me on.
Absolutely. Take care. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.